A young woman bravely recounts the most horrifying moments of her life.
He took off my underwear that I had on.
Claiming she was sexually assaulted repeatedly by, of all people, her uncle, a respected firefighter.
He was the father to my cousins, so I thought nothing bad of him. He held me down by my wrists to a bed that was never, ever meant for what was done there.
And here's the worst part. This didn't just happen. She wasn't even 6 years old when her nightmare began.
And then he had me perform oral sex.
But now her uncle claims she's lying.
There was never, ever, ever any sexual contact.
And 14 years later, this courageous survivor is about to be traumatized all over again, this time in court.
He put his penis up to my vagina.
That's the biggest fear, is that no one's gonna believe you.
Her name is Andrea, and her own Me Too story is a chilling recollection. Now, the 19-year-old is bravely coming forward to recall unspeakable acts of horror, she says, at the hands of her own uncle.
He made me touch him.
Andrea grew up in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio, living a childhood with typical memories of holidays spent with family, including her Uncle Tim.
I saw him mostly at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
She claims she was only 3 years old when he singled her out, lavishing her with attention.
He just showed a lot of favor to me and told me I was pretty and, touched my hair, which was, I guess, kind of odd, considering there were so many of us.
Odd indeed, but Tim Durbin's behavior seemingly flew under the radar of Andrea's parents, who Andrea says never noticed their little girl becoming a sick object of attraction for a man pushing 40. Fast forward a few years. Tim started working construction jobs to supplement his income. That's when Andrea's parents hired him to remodel their home.
He did the construction for that.
Andrea was only 6 years old at the time. But suddenly, with Uncle Tim around the house all day working, she says he soon began paying creepy visits to her bedroom.
He would come to my room when people weren't really around. And at one point, my mom left us there with him to go to the store, and my dad was working, and of course, no fault of her own to think that anything would go wrong.
But Andrea tells me things went terribly wrong. Within a short time, Andrea alleges Durbin began sexually molesting her whenever he had the chance.
He made me do things to him, and he did things to me.
Andrea says the agonizing visits from her uncle became more frequent and more aggressive.
He made me, perform oral sex on him, and did the same to me, telling me that I was doing a good job and I was doing it right. And then when I resisted doing it, that he hit me in the face.
Did he rape you? Did he physically rape you?
Yeah.
When you were 6 years old?
Yeah.
Unbelievably, it was about to get worse, growing into a physical and psychological nightmare. Andrea claims Durbin controlled her by saying he would harm her family if she ever told.
At first, I think he thought I could keep it based on how nice he was. You're prettier than all the other girls, And, if you can't tell anyone, they'll be, jealous, it's our secret. And then when I started to resist him more, he said that he would hurt my family and hurt me and if I told them anything.
Terrified, Andrea never revealed to her parents the insidious abuse she claimed she suffered at the hands of a trusted uncle, right under their roof.
What did you do while this was happening to survive?
Your brain knows how to save you from these things, which is incredible and awful, and you're just not there at some point. You just shut it down. So I just shut it down.
But Andrea tells me things went terribly wrong. Within a short time, Andrea alleges Durbin began sexually molesting her whenever he had the chance.
The thing that I think stays with me a lot is the way he held my wrist to my bed while he was touching me. I still can't be grabbed in that way, ever. I unravel if someone does that.
You have a bit of PTSD from what he did to you.
For sure.
While Andrea says she was happy to be rid of the monster, what he left behind was a deeply scarred child, still hiding the secrets that would haunt her for the rest of her life. As the years passed on, it looked like Uncle Tim would never pay the price for what he had done. Or would he? Andrea was living with a dark family secret.
You just shut up and you go with it because you're terrified.
At the tender age of 6, she had suffered the unimaginable brutal sexual assaults allegedly at the hands of her own uncle.
What do you say to people who say, how can you remember something from that young of an age, 5 and 6 years old?
It's stamped in your brain. And so when this huge thing started happening to me, you can't forget it. Believe me, I wanted to.
The nightmare had finally ended when her Uncle Tim finished his construction work on the family house. But now Andrea was left to cope with the haunting memories and psychological trauma that left even deeper scars. Andrea started harming herself by cutting her own flesh.
I was cutting myself a lot, and it got to the point where no one could figure out what the root of this was, and I wouldn't tell them.
Her psyche so damaged she even experienced hallucinations.
So I had, voices telling me to hurt myself, to hurt other people. And thankfully, of course, I only listened to the hurting myself because I felt like that was the only thing I could control.
But the deep incisions down her arm finally caught the attention of her 7th grade volleyball coach.
It's kind of hard to play a sport and have cuts down your arm, especially a sport where the ball hits your arm every other moment. So she knew.
That coach intervened, telling Andrea's parents about her wounds. They promptly sent Andrea to a therapist.
They had no idea what you were struggling with.
I had kept it to myself for so long I wasn't going to stop keeping it then. I still didn't trust anyone yet.
And that trust didn't come easily. It would take a year of counseling before Andrea would spill her deepest, darkest secrets.
My counselor to this day has never heard the details of what happened to me because she hasn't felt that it's essential for me to disclose them to her in order for me to heal from them.
After revealing enough to the therapist, Andrea finally broke the devastating news to her parents.
When I was on a volunteer trip to Costa Rica when I was a sophomore, and I texted my parents and I said something happened to me, and that is why I am the way I am. And I didn't tell them who did it. Couldn't yet.
When you did see them, what was their reaction?
It makes you hard to think these things happened under your own roof and without you knowing. And I can't begin to imagine to this day what my parents must feel about that. I don't really want to imagine it. I imagine it's not pretty.
After more than a decade, the crushing weight of this horrible secret was lifted.
They believed me, and that's the biggest fear, is that no one's gonna believe you, no one's gonna hear you.
But Andrea still did not reveal exactly who violated her trust. Would her alleged abuser ever pay the price for the innocence he stole? After hearing Andrea's harrowing story, it was finally pieced together who she says the perpetrator was.
Somebody found some of my personal writing where I utilized this metaphor about a firefighter and fire and burn and arson and all this, and so they pieced it together on their own.
It was a moment years in the making, with firefighter Tim Durbin, Andrea's own uncle, unmasked as her alleged abuser. Her therapist reported the alleged sexual assaults to police, but a terrified Andrea refused to press charges.
I did initially tell them, if you report this, I will say it's not true. I won't do it. I can't face him. I can't do it. I won't do it. And then I realized, I felt like I owed it to myself, but also so much to anybody else this could be happening to.
Finally, Andrea had a change of heart. She bravely goes to cops where, for the first time, tells her version of the full story, revealing all the alleged details of her shocking ordeal.
How old do you think you were, or do you have any idea?
Like 6-ish. I was just playing with my hair and complimenting me. And then he had me perform oral sex.
When you say oral sex, Andrea, what do you consider oral sex?
Well, compared his penis to being like a lollipop, like candy.
Even though the alleged abuse happened years before with no forensic evidence and no witnesses, prosecutor Kyle Rohr says the allegations against Tim Durbin were stunning.
I've been a prosecutor for 20 years, and I believed her story.
What did she say happened?
He sexually assaulted her on multiple occasions. All of them occurred in her bedroom, and all of them involved sexual intercourse, oral sex, things you typically think of when you think of rape. Nothing you should ever think of in the context of a 5-year-old child, ever.
Now, more than a decade later, would this teenager find justice? More than a decade after Andrea's alleged abuser walked away, this brave young woman reveals her shocking truth to detectives. We want to warn you, her story is graphic.
You said he had touched you with his hands over your clothes. Was that on top of your pajamas and your panties, or just on top of your panties or underwear, whichever?
Yeah, no, over both.
Okay. And then he removed your underwear.
Over both.
She was only 6 years old. Now cops want to talk to the man she claims violated her innocence, her Uncle Tim Durbin.
So the reason you're here today is because there has been an allegation that there was some inappropriateness between you and a child. Do you want to tell me about that?
I don't have the slightest clue.
But Andrea says she does remember how it all started, while she and her cousins were playing hide and seek.
I was under my desk.
So he came in and shut the door, you said? And then what happened?
A lot of compliments, like, you're just really pretty, you're the prettiest cousin.
When cops asked Tim about the alleged incident, he denies ever being in the same room with his niece.
Never happened.
Andrea tells detectives that she enjoyed the extra attention from her uncle at first, but she says the compliments quickly crossed the line.
He would get very upset with you if you didn't let him kiss you on the mouth? Okay.
Yeah. I think, and once he became more forceful, I was like, well, I'm not going to disobey what he's saying. He started touching me in other places, like in my vagina area and stuff like that, and I was forced to touch him.
But again, Durbin flat out denies having any form of sexual contact with Andrea.
Nothing that she could misconstrue as a child?
You know what? I mean,
You know, if it did happen, it's not the end of the world. It's not like you killed somebody. I mean,
no, but there was never, ever any sexual contact.
Andrea remembers things differently as she describes in graphic detail the horrifying things she claims her Uncle Tim did to her.
I was in my bed and he came in and closed the door and got, like, sat on my bed. I was like, laying down, started me over my clothes, like touching me over my clothes. And then he took off my underwear that I had on and he pulled out his pants.
When detectives press Durbin further, he sticks to his story.
well, it's not my first interview. It's not my first day as a detective.
Right, that's fine, but I know that I have no clue.
Okay.
And so when you are, you're starting to accuse me of something, I would say you better be pretty confident.
They were so confident, detectives get a warrant for Durbin's arrest. The now 51-year-old firefighter is charged with rape, gross sexual imposition, and kidnapping.
What convinced you to take on this case despite the lack of corroborating evidence?
Just Andrea, when you listen to her story, she's compelling. You could tell that there was some serious trauma in her life, and the natural source of the trauma was the sexual assault.
The case goes to trial as both sides come out with guns blazing. The prosecution taking jurors back to that very first day when Durbin allegedly assaulted Andrea in her own bed.
He began touching her vagina over her clothing. Then he stopped. He left. Told her not to tell. Why did he stop that day? Grooming. He was getting away with it, and he didn't want to push too far. He was planting the seeds of normalcy, fear, guilt.
The defense countered that the abuse never happened, attacking the victim by claiming Andrea had serious mental issues that led to the accusations against her Uncle Tim.
There's a young woman who has a troubled mind. There's a family that's going through strife. And what we know to be true in this case, ladies and gentlemen, in this case, there is an innocent man.
And that's exactly what Andrea's aunt told jurors in this defense of her now ex-husband.
There came a point in time when you became aware of these allegations.
Yes.
What was your reaction when you became aware?
Never happened. It's no. Doesn't fit him? No. Without a doubt. That was my reaction.
Andrea's mother, Beth, took the stand, testifying that her daughter's behavior dramatically changed after the alleged assaults.
It got weird. More than once she would run up to me and give me this quick side hug and run away. Sometimes she would just throw herself in my lap and cry for a minute and then get up and run away from me.
Then, in a sensational courtroom moment, Andrea takes the stand. Watch as she calmly walks past her Uncle Tim, who sits just feet away from her.
Okay, tell the jury then where were you when the third incident occurred?
In my bed, in my pajamas. He put his penis up to my vagina, and I don't really know if there was penetration. It hurt, so I know there was an attempt at least.
Did it feel as if he was trying to penetrate your vagina?
Yes.
Durbin never took the stand.
What was it like to face him from the stand and see him while testifying here about what he did?
You know, I looked at him so he knew that I knew he was there. Not that I was afraid of him anymore, but in that moment, he was afraid of what I could do to him.
After nearly a year of alleged sexual assaults, Andrea says she was tormented by memories of Tim Durbin. To cope, she started cutting herself, contemplated suicide, and heard voices.
Were you aware that they would command her to do certain things?
Yes.
To harm herself?
Yes.
The defense seized on the theory that Andrea's harrowing ordeal never happened and was actually the results of what they call displaced memories, or visions planted in Andrea's mind through hypnosis.
Did you ever have any doubt about your memory?
No.
Did you ever have any doubt about the sexual abuse?
No.
Did you ever have any doubt about who did it?
No.
What does that do to you? When someone in court said that you had false planted memories.
The idea that my counselor, hypnotized me or something is insane, because the only thing we ever did was just talk about how I felt now and my relationships and how I'm going to move forward.
The case rested, and after 8 hours of deliberations, a staggering outcome: a hung jury.
You kind of feel your heart sink when you walked out of that courtroom thinking you had just torn your heart out for all these people.
But then another dramatic development.
It's my understanding the state will dismiss counts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 of the indictment.
Instead of facing another trial, Tim Durbin cut a deal, a controversial move under what is known as the Alford plea. The prosecutor and the family agreed to drop the rape charges, and in exchange, Durbin pleaded guilty to an abduction charge, which meant no jail time and only 5 years of community control, which means Durbin will have to report to a probation officer.
Do you think he got off light?
I do. How can you get away with this, and this is all you get?
Crime Watch Daily repeatedly reached out to Durbin's attorney for comment, but he declined our request. As for Andrea, now this brave young woman has finally closed the chapter of her horror story and has put the pain in the past.
To somehow balance the universe a little, but that doesn't always happen that way. And the thing that I know for sure is I'm going to be okay. I'm not sure he will.
And with me right now to break down the very troubling and complicated case of Timothy Durbin is criminal defense lawyer Sarah Azari. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
You've spent a lot of time in court defending criminal cases. Why do you think this ended in a hung jury?
I think because this case turned on Andrea's mental state, and both sides used that to their advantage. So for the prosecution, it was that because of the trauma of the rape, she suffered these hallucinations and this tormented mind. And for the defense, it allowed the defense to raise the issue of reasonable doubt. And so because of her mental state, because of her inability to be able to, with certainty, testify as to the events that occurred versus the voices in her head, the jurors could not unanimously vote. So two people held out.
This could have been a lot more serious for Tim at the end of the day. I mean, he got a pretty good deal on this plea.
He absolutely did. I think he is avoiding the risk of being found guilty on a number of very serious charges, which were sexual assault charges that would subject him, if convicted, to a lifetime of sex registration. Okay. So he's avoiding that. He's also avoiding prison time.
Explain this Alford plea. What is that?
The Alford plea is a mysterious plea. It's essentially where the defendant says, I'm innocent, but I'm guilty because I admit that if the prosecution goes to trial, they can prove me guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But it allows the defendant to maintain his innocence, at the same time suffering a conviction, which brings justice for the victim.